people will, let's say kids will see me on the streets and say I'm Migugin.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Wegugin, the Wegugin word is not even like, it's not even you. It's not being used by people that much. Like people will ask me, "You're Migugin," which means, "Are you American?" You're American, and I would say, "No, I'm not American." And they would say, "But you're a foreigner," and I'd say, "Yes, I'm a foreigner." So Migugin. So it's gonna sort of like that. And I usually have this term that I use to like describe people on the subway way back when they see a foreigner.
Mm.
I call it the crab walk.
Mm-hmm.
Like they walk sideways when they see you coming to them, because the way that we stand on the platform, it's kind of like we're side by side,
Right.
and then they see me at the side, on the side of their eyes, and then they start to walk like a crab sideways going to the next door, because sometimes I still, when I was new here, I have no idea. I haven't used the subway. There wasn't any subway in the Philippines. There was, but it was just in the big city. So it was kind of like I really wanted to know if I'm in the right platform or I should be at the one in front. But people really do the crab walk until they reach the end of the platform, and then they turn around. So that's what I used to call it. But these days, really, honestly, it's so different.
Yeah.
People actually come to you, especially the younger generation. And even the older generations, if you look like you're lost
Mm-hmm.
or you lost something, like people will come up to you to, "Hey, can I help you? Like, do you need anything?" It's something like that. And but what the big difference is the fact that they're not used to having people like me. People of, from Southeast Asia,
Right.
seeing people like me around. My neighborhood way back then, we have a lot of people in my neighborhood who would often tell me or ask me about, where I am from. And they're all just so curious how I ended up being in Korea. Um, I think the it's the trainee system for the workers. It started in 1991, but they're still not used to it because this is the city. Most of those workers or foreign workers are going to like factories
Right.
in the provinces. So they're still not used to seeing a lot of me going around, but they're
Yeah.
used to, seeing Western people going around. So it wasn't that big of a deal, but when they see me, it's sort of a big of a deal for them. And it was like they're just curious how I end up here. They would ask me questions, and they would not even blink while asking me, "Well, how much does your husband make?"
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like
Right.
it's sort of taboo in many other countries. Why would you ask someone how much their spouse make?
Yeah.
But yeah, they do that, and that's actually out of curiosity. That was how it was way back then. And I used to remember my mother-in-law would often look at me and will try to show me
Mm.
like appliances, like electrical appliances in the house. Like she would open the refrigerator and say, "It's cold, right? Right. This is a 냉장고." It's like, oh dear, we have a lot of that. And this is a paptong.
Yeah.
It's something like that. It's like people are not used to having people like me going on around and about.
Yeah. Right. And
Hmm.
they want to show you everything. They want to show you the fridges, the kimchi, and all of it.
Yes.
What was
Uh-huh.
the city like, Jasmine? Because now it's the infrastructure, the
Bustling,
subway.
yeah.
It's what was it like in the mid-90s? That like Seoul.
It's it kind of like, if you think about it and how Seoul looks like right now,
Mm.
it's like if you compare it to people,
Yeah.
like it's the younger generation. There are less taller buildings. The
Mm-hmm.
tallest building back then was like the 63 building in
Yeah.
Yoido. And but I was still so amazed to see it as really. I've seen it because I was born in Manila. I have seen things in Manila, but then again, it's kind of like it's different. This is for me at least. I see Seoul as a really bustling city, but it's not. Um, I know it's not as congested as it is right now.
Mm.
If I can say that, yeah, I think so. It's not as congested as it is right now, and but it's still, it's a big city. I
Right.
mean, because I'm just looking at all of, and in the mixture, I was really so amazed by the mixture of how an advanced city just like Seoul can actually, where I mean, culture and then modernity can exist in one particular place. Like I
Mm.
would see the
Yeah.
palaces, and then I would see the buildings right in front of it. I don't know if you have stood up inside the Gyeongbok Palace and looked out to the Gwanghwamun Square,
Mm.
and you're going to see, wow, this is like, I'm seeing like from inside the palace. I'm seeing how the city has changed that
Yeah.
much. Hmm.
It's a great time warp, that part of the city in particular, the Gwanghwamun. One
Yeah.
thing that I've got huge respect for you for is your Korean language skills. I mean,
Oh.
I'm battling with it myself. I do lessons twice a week still to try to keep up with it, but
Uh-huh.
it's something that's impossible to master, perhaps. But what was your experience like in learning the language? Because you've got such hold and mastery of it. But what was that like for you, Jasmine?
Before I came to, because I dated my husband for a year. We dated for a year and a half before we got married. So
Hmm.
I can still remember when he sent me this big box, and I said, "Wow, what a gift!" I mean, from Korea, and I was opening the box just to see
Yeah.
like cassette tapes. That was way back. So there's no CDs yet. Those were cassette tapes of Korean language and books.
Oh, how
Where I can learn
romantic.
about Korean language. Yeah, see that of Korean language and
Mm.
Korean culture. I was really, really young then. I haven't been out of the country because I was just 17 then, and I was like looking at all of these books, and it's all in English. I mean, I still have that particular book right at this moment. That's
Wow,
like
that's
what,
great.
almost 30 years ago, and I can
Mm.
see, all of myself scribbling on the book, all of the scribbles that I had from book. And I did not even use a pen. I used a pencil because I have to make sure that I can rewrite them again. So I basically can read and write in Korean before I came to Korea.
Mm, that's good.
And but I don't have no idea what I'm writing or what I'm reading, but I can read it. I mean, I can voice it out. I
Yeah.
can read the syllables and all of that. And I was really I was really in awe when I got on the plane, and I can read all of those stuff, inside the plane, and they were in Korean.
Hmm.
And of course, because it's a plane, they had it in Korean and they had it in English as well. So it's kind of like, oh, so that's how it works. Um, but then again, as you can see, I love talking. I mean, this that's one thing that I really love, and being a part of a very big family with a grandmother. I arrived in Korea with a grandmother-in-law, a
Mm.
mother-in-law, a father-in-law, and a brother-in-law
Wow.
who doesn't. They don't all speak English.
Hmm.
Only my husband does, and yeah, I figured out earlier on that I should learn the language, but I've been fascinated by the language. I think it's also got to do with the fact that I moved to Davao City, to the provinces in the Philippines, when I
Mm.
was 12.
Hmm.
And if you know about the Philippines, we don't even call all of those different languages dialects.
Okay.
All of because some people would often say they are dialects, but they're totally different from each other because it's an island nation. And
Uh,
it's kind of like here in Korea when you don't really understand someone who speaks the Jeju-do Korean.
hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, so it's totally different.
Right.
And I think I was in sixth grade in elementary when we moved to the provinces, and I was really So it was a difficult time for me
Mm.
because I don't speak the language, and the kids would make fun of me because I don't speak the language. And I swear then and there that I'm going to master this language and I'm going to outdo all of you. It's
Hmm.
kind of like an attitude. And so
Yeah.
when I came to Korea, it was kind of like for me another province back in the Philippines that I need to
Okay.
learn the language as well.
Okay.
And I had a lot of help because I live with a lot of Koreans.
It definitely helps. I think living and speaking to Korean people helps. The attitude helps. Perhaps your
Yeah.
age, being young,
Yes,
you're a
of
sponge
course.
then. When you're old, it's
Hmm.
so hard to remember things. Um,
Yeah.
is Were there anything else? Just one more on the language, because a lot of people try to learn the Korean language. We know
Hmm.
how important it is. Like, are there any
Hmm.
other sort of tips or advice you would have on people trying to get the language in their way of thinking, in their brains?
The very first reason that I tried to really learn the language was along with that box with the books and the cassette tapes for
Mm,
the language learning. My husband sent me two tapes.
yeah.
It's from Park Mi-kyung
Okay.
and Park Chung-eun. So they're singers, like they're very well-known singers during that time
Mm,
in the 90s. And I really loved some of their songs that I tried to memorize them without even understanding what it is. And I still remember the fact that I sang this. Uh, it's a song from Park Chung-eun. It's called Mon Hunnal,
okay.
and I sang it to my husband, not even knowing that it's actually a song about breaking up. So it's kind of like it's
Yeah.
funny like that. You realize that later on, you sang it lovingly to someone when in
Yeah.
fact later on you realize that it was about
Oh,
breaking up.
no.
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons. And when I came to Korea, I got really into the dramas.
Yeah.
And from like we would often say Koreans, why can't they learn English enough when they have been like learning it for 12 years in school?
Mm,
And I would say, because it's the same in the Philippines, except of course we use the same alphabet as the English alphabet
yeah.
in trying to spell out Tagalog. But the thing is, um, we spoke a totally different language. We learned English in the school,
Right.
when we were attending school. So it's kind of like I thought it's going to be the same year, but it isn't. Definitely,
Sure.
it isn't. So when you are in a country, when you move to a new country, you tend to pick up on the conversational uh, part of the language first, and
Absolutely.
then it's hard for you to write, which is kind of different for Koreans because they're good at writing in English, but they cannot speak it that well.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it's the other way around for me. So what I did way back then, and it was even difficult because newspapers way back then have a lot of hanja or
Yeah.
Chinese characters in them.
Yeah.
And what I did to practice my writing ability is just to copy. Like we have lots of calendars that we don't use. We get from here and there. We don't have
Mm,
that these days anymore. But way back then, like calendars are pouring in from all different agencies, from all different stores,
mm,
and like it's like the in thing to give to your customers or the in thing to give to people. So we have a lot of calendars, and I used to just rewrite what I see on the newspaper at the back of calendars.
okay.
Yeah, that's how I practiced my writing. And back then, I mean, I did not have a cell phone. A lot of people had a cell phone, and I
Mm.
just used to, write my friends letters. I mean, slow mails,
Hmm.
really,
Yep.
through the
Yep.
post. And writing it made me, it might not pop out on your head how to write it, but your hands know how to like, okay, this is not how it is written. You look at it, you
Right.
write a word, you look at it, and then you remember, okay, this is not how it is written. And one of the best things is that I'm not afraid to make mistakes.
Absolutely.
Like
Mm.
I just blurt out every single thing that pops to mind whenever I wanted to speak in Korean. So it sort of helped in a way. My mother-in-law would often, I don't remember because people would ask me, when did you start, speaking Korean
Mm.
to other people? And I don't remember when, but my mother-in-law told me like in less than a year of, living with them, I started to
Mm.
speak to them in Korean.
That's great that you did that. And I
Yeah.
think having people like, well, Park Mi-kyung and the Park Jong-un, the
Mm-hmm.
singers, and also the family, it helps you get into it. I still, by the
Yeah.
way, have 3 calendars on my desk in front of me. So I applaud you. They're still here. I don't know why I get them, but I'm using them. I'm using
Okay.
them. Um,
Uh-huh.
I'll never forget actually the first time I dreamt in Korean. That was weird to me, like waking
Oh,
up and all of a sudden I was
yeah.
like speaking Korean in my dreams last night, and I was like, wow, that's fascinating. Um,
Yeah, and I think in a way, I was so afraid to speak in Korean because I was so afraid of sounding so foolish at first.
mm,
I was in Korea for 3 months and I have to leave and go back to the Philippines for a month because I was here for a tourist visa
yeah,
back then, and then I came back for another tourist visa. But that was like after a month of being in the Philippines, and lo and behold,
yeah,
I don't know what happened after, not speaking Korean for or not hearing Korean for 1 month. I came back to Korea
yeah.
different, with a different like perspective. So
Okay.
I really tried to speak in Korean, and I don't know why, but I seem to remember. I mean, that particular 1 month
Mm,
gap gave me, maybe gave me time to think about, how to regarding the language, because I went back to the Philippines and I speak little Korean, and
yeah,
people, it just amazed people, and it
sure.
just gave me, the courage to, okay, I should learn this more. And when I came back to Korea, it became a lot easier for me to get a
Mm.
grasp of the language.
Yeah, I think that perspective is really important, and perhaps that time away. And again, full respect for you for everything you've done with it. From those tourist visas that you were just mentioning,
Mhm.
Jasmine, you eventually become a nationalized Korean. Right? And so
Yeah, that was back in 1998. Uh-huh.
1998, and there aren't as many. We often read about, Korean people getting nationalities going the other way for various reasons,
Hmm.
but it's not as
Hmm.
common, or it's not as in the news as much. What was the
Hmm.
process of becoming a Korean national like? Was there a test? Was there a ceremony? What was it like doing that?
Oh no, way back. That was in 1990s. That was in 1998 when I got my
Okay,
citizenship.
so what was it
But
like?
there
Mm.
were no exams. There were no nothing. I mean,
Wow.
when I first got married, I was given a dual citizenship right away when we reported our marriage.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was
S-
really, really different. When we reported a marriage, when I came to Korea, I was given automatically a dual citizenship, and
Mm.
I was given 6 months to
Okay.
decide whether I would take my Korean citizenship and give up my Filipino citizenship. But way back then, I thought, well, I'm still studying, I'm still in university,
Mm.
and I have to go back to the Philippines and finish uni before coming back to Korea and, changing my nationality if that will be the case.
Mm.
Um, but then again, things don't go as planned.
Sure.
We had a baby, and I had to stay in Korea. So being a Korean will make a lot of things different. But then again, I did not change my citizenship in that 6 month span of time.
Hmm.
And what happened was I changed my citizenship because my name did not appear on the Jumindong Tungbon, the
Right.
family registry here in
Yeah.
Korea.
Yeah.
Because my son's name is there, my husband's name is there, his entire family, because we live
Mm.
together, is in there,
Oh, yeah.
but I wasn't there. So it's
That's
kind of like
sad.
hard for me to prove.
Mm.
It's kind of hard for me to prove that this is my son.
Hmm.
And it took so much, because it took so much fight with with NGOs, with took so much fight with all of this civic groups
Yeah.
to be able to put our names, because we are foreigners,
Hmm.
in the family registry.
Yeah.
Now, when that first happened, I don't know if you have seen this like light blue paper that I'm saying, Jumindong Nuktungbon.
Yep. I know it well. Yeah.
Yes, and when it was first approved that if you're a foreign member of the family, that your name can appear on the Jumindong Nuktungbon,
Mm.
it was like, if you see all of the names of the people living in that particular address, and then you see a line
Hmm.
that says "Iha Opsum."
Uh,
So there's nothing under this line,
yeah.
and then your name pops on under it. Isn't it funny?
It's legally separated despite being
E-
family, isn't it?
yeah, so Iha Opsum, and then your name pops in. So we had
Yeah.
to fight for it, and now it's all there. It's you can see even if you did not change your citizenship, but that was one of the
Yeah.
reasons that I changed my citizenship as well. You know, just to have my name on paper and for me
Hmm.
to not have any hardship when I go to places, or, you know, even then, way back then, if you want to go and make a library card for your kid, you
Hmm.
actually have to prove that you're actually his mom. And that's the only paper that proves that you're his mom.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the
So
thing.
yeah, it's different way back then. Uh-huh.
It's great that you got it, and I do know that things have gotten better since then. But yeah, it's
Hmm.
interesting to hear that there was no kind of test or anything like that. It was just
Yeah.
given
There's
like
no
that.
nothing.
Yeah.
And that was the reason of the changes. That was the reason that there were a lot of changes every single year with the nationality,
Yeah.
you know, with changing nationality, because back then it was reported a lot
Hmm.
about, you know, other nationalities marrying Koreans for, you know, just to get the nationality, just to
Hmm.
get the citizenship, because you automatically have the citizenship within 6 months. So they take advantage of that, and you know, they just um, get the citizenship, then get divorced because
Right.
they got the citizenship already. And I did not even have, these days when you change your citizenship, you are given like a kwiha chungso, a certificate that you actually you're a naturalized Korean. I
Hmm.
did not have that way back.
Wow.
Yeah,
So it was really different back then.
it's really really different.
In terms of um, citizenship and understanding, like there can be some people that don't have Korean citizenship, that don't have that Korean nationality. They might be
Hmm.
American, for example, but sometimes Korean people will still see them as Korean. And
Hmm.
you can have naturalized citizens like yourself, and you have the Korean passport, everything legal, but are not quite considered Korean. There's that kind of minjok thing that comes in sometimes.
Yeah.
What
Uh-huh,
what
uh-huh.
was your experience with that? When you had that nationality, were you then considered Korean? Did you feel Korean or?
Of course not. It would be a lie if I said that, yeah, I automatically feel like I'm Korean. But
Mm,
one of the thing I think it's I think an attitude that I have.
mm,
I have uh, I have always been an optimist, you
yeah,
know, so I see
it's great.
things in a very, very different light. Like my friends would often call me like the what do you call it, the positivity guru.
It's a
Like
nice
I
name.
try to yeah, the positivity guru. Like if my friends are lost, or, you know, if they are disappointed at something, they will just call me and said, okay, I need your positivity, so,
Hmm.
you know, put it on me now. So I still remember those times, and I did not feel that it's but it did not matter, or maybe time, a lot of time has passed already that I don't
Mm,
even remember how I felt during that particular time of my life. But you know, of course, all of the questions, it just goes with how I look,
yeah.
you know, with how I look. So, you know, when people see me, of course, automatically they won't think that I'm Korean, and there's no way. Like the first question that I always have had
Mm,
is, where are you from?
sure.
Where are you from? So it's, yeah, I have never but I did not think of it as something that I don't belong.
Hmm.
Yeah, the positivity guru is actually working in there. So I did not think of it as being, you know, not belonging, except for the
Hmm.
fact that, you know, um I don't really have friends and family here in Korea. In my family, I'm in a new environment altogether, but I'm trying to, you know, get used to it, to adapt to it. Maybe I just try to think that, well, you know, people can be like this, because I've moved from the city in the Philippines to another city in the province, and it
Mm,
was really a difficult time for me. And I was younger then,
mm,
but I was a bit older when I came to Korea, and I was thinking, well, this is a piece of cake.
yeah.
Like, you know, even if they don't consider me as, you know, a part of the group, because I am new here, that's something like, um, of course, that will happen. Like
Hmm.
당연하지.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
sort of something like that. So really, I did not give it much thought way back then. I would think so.
Right.
But if, of course, you know, you being asked questions like, do you know this? Do you know how to use this? Do you know how to eat these? Does Philippines have this or that? Yeah, that makes you feel like you're not really a part of it, because they don't really ask that to other people.
Right. But I love the attitude where you can't necessarily change how people are going to treat you, but you can change how you react to
You
it, and
think,
you can
yeah,
you can have
yes.
that positivity guru attitude, and it
Hmm.
makes dealing with it a little bit better. Looking at
Yeah.
a lot of your work, you're so associated with the concept of multiculturalism, and when
Hmm.
I was going through it, even your attitudes towards multiculturalism changed over time, from
Hmm.
wanting to change the term to accept it. And I
Yeah.
guess the first question I want to ask is, do multiculturalism and Tamuna
Hmm.
mean the same thing? What do they mean? Like, how do you understand those terms?
Well, when I started to talk about the term Tamuna, when I first came here in Korea, there's no term here. There's only Wegugin.
Yeah.
There's not even Ijumin. There's not even like an Iju There's no word. There's just Wegugin.
Mm.
Wegugin, like your wife is Wegugin. There's just this one word.
Which would mean
And
something like outsider or something, foreigner, but
yes,
outsider as
yeah,
well, I
yes, a
guess. Yeah.
foreigner. Yeah, he's married to a foreigner. Like
Mm.
I'm married. That foreigner is married to a Korean.
Yeah.
It's That's the only term that existed way back then. There's no other term that people would use,
Hmm.
and that they don't even use the term iminja, because as we know, the term iminja actually pertains to a Korean who moved out of the country.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. That's I don't know if you can hear that, but that's my coffee machine turning off. But anyway,
It's fine. It's coffee.
okay. So there's no word such as that. So I have never given it any thought actually. But when they started to introduce the word tamunha, it
Mm.
started to make rounds in the newspapers. There wasn't even a word called multiculturalism in the Philippines, when it's actually, it's there are a lot of people who are from mixed backgrounds in the
Mm.
Philippines, having Spanish backgrounds, Japanese backgrounds, Chinese backgrounds, American
Okay.
backgrounds. And there are a lot of people who got married and who migrated to other countries. And the term iminja, they don't even use that on me way back
Mm.
here in Korea, because as I've said, imin means, those going out
Hmm.
of Korea, those Koreans, pertaining to those Koreans going out of Korea. So when the word tamunha started to make its rounds on the newspaper, I said, oh, wow, this is great. Like, people are trying to notice us, that there are people like us who are not just foreigners, but are settling in Korea already.
Mm.
So
A
it was a
positive thing.
welcoming, yeah, it was a
Mm.
welcoming thing for me. And then I started to that was back in the early 2000s, and I started broadcasting in 2005.
Hmm.
And then, suddenly, Love in Asia popped out. Those love, I don't know if you still remember that TV program called Love in Asia, but it's a TV program where they show the lives of multicultural families.
Okay.
It's one of the longest running way back. I think they stopped it in 2015, but it went for 10 plus years. That program was one of the longest running program of KBS way back then.
Wow.
And they just show the lives of multicultural families. And the real goal back then was to actually tell people that, multicultural families are people like us,
Absolutely.
our families like us. But then again, of course, people will look at it differently. You are given one particular view of the lives of those people, and you will have, depending on your what do you call this, depending on your perspective, depending on how you understand how other people in other countries are, then
Mm.
it will, how you look at the program will definitely differ. And
Mm.
it was a welcoming thing for me. But then again, it began to be, as I have said,
Mm.
why the media has a very, very big role in in making that stereotype about tamunha is
Mm.
because of those sort of programs that, because, I'm just going to give an example. Like, people will see, because in this program, um, they document your life here in Korea,
Yeah.
and then they go to your country of the foreign spouse. They go to the country of the foreign spouse, and then document the life of her family there. Now we
Okay.
have different standards when it comes to looking at people and how people live. Like
Yeah.
you can be someone who are like from middle to high range um, uh, families
Hmm.
in the Philippines, but that would not look like it here in Korea.
Yeah.
The way that you live, the way that your house looks like might not look like what a middle to high range families look like
Mm.
here in Korea. So
Yeah.
they just try to get all of those in by like, oh no, my God, that's a pity. They live in this kind of a house or that kind of a
Mm.
house. So
Right.
they make their own assumptions that, you don't live well back then. And that's what happens. I mean, if you have seen a lot of Southeast Asian, neighborhoods or Southeast Asian countries, you can
Hmm.
actually like, especially if you are someone who's living in a city such as Seoul, it's really, really different.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So it's yeah, so I think looking at that, and always, and of course this is the media, they're on the opposite sides of spectrum. When you have a TV show, you
Mm.
either make people laugh or you either make people cry. When I first came to Korea, the people that you can actually, because all those in the middle are documentaries,
Hmm.
and when I first came to Korea, what I saw on television were Ida Doshi, you know uh I think that's Halley. Is that Robert Harley?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep. Yep. Yep.
yeah. So you see them during like Thanksgiving or during like the Lunar New Year on
Mm.
special shows, and they kind of like either speak odd Koreans, or they make them sing, they make them
Yeah.
dance, they make them like, it's a funny thing to see a foreigner in media way back then when I first came here in Korea.
Mm.
But then come 2000 and the rise of the numbers of multicultural families, and
Mm.
then they realized that they can't make fun of the foreigners coming in, because we have different problems that's being shown on the news, like the high divorce rate, or
Mm.
um, foreign spouses actually just getting married and then running away, or kids being bullied, or men from rural areas who cannot get a wife, a Korean wife, trying to
Mm.
get a wife in Southeast Asian countries. So it stuck to that name, multicultural family,
Yeah.
became a label of some sorts for those kind of people.
Hmm.
Like they are not the normal family, and they are not those family in the these are families who need help.
Yeah.
That's how they are assumed to be, and that's how the word Tamuna became in an instant. It became like a word that even multicultural families don't really want to use.
Sure. Becomes another
Mhm.
label, doesn't it, to differentiate? So you're
Yes.
not us,
Uh-huh.
you're that thing, and it becomes then easy to
Yeah.
talk about those people instead of actually talking to them, I guess.
Yeah, it's so funny because when the word Tamuna became a word on the policies of the government, it was really so amazing, because it's a new word, and I don't know, like, it felt like people think it's chic to be able
Mm.
to use the word,
Yeah.
and like, so you're Tamuna, right? So they think that it's
Trendy.
at first it was like a positive thing that they're
Mm.
using a what do we call that, a term that is a legal term,
Hmm.
a new term, so it kind of looks cool, or might sound cool or chic, or make you sound like you're knowledgeable.
Mm.
So you're Tamuna family. That's how it started. And then you go on a trip. There was this event when people actually just when multicultural families and ordinary Korean families come together. So we know how people live, just a get together.
Yeah.
And then they see you in a way like, okay, multicultural, okay, Tamuna families in this bus and Korean families in this bus.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how it happened at first. At first, they thought that it's a word that you're trying to respect this particular sector of the society until it became a label altogether.
Yeah. But it's interesting. So it was a term of sort of being progressive or modern, maybe it even started with good meanings, but then how
Yes.
it plays out. Was there, just to stay on this topic a little bit more, you've mentioned sort of people going on television and also the foreign bride situation, both huge topics, right? But
Yeah.
there is sometimes the Tamanoa on television is represented kind of sometimes by people like me. I've had loads of television experiences, and that's the 한국에 처음 왔다, like the white people doing
Yeah.
it. Was it hard, or did it make a difference to have different types of foreign people, non-Korean people, people from Southeast Asia, all other parts of the world, because they're a huge demographic? What was it like getting that on media and representing those realities?
Let me give you the negative part of it first.
Okay, sure.
When we were doing Love in Asia, I was a regular panel, guest panel in Love in Asia. So I was there every week, and it was the time slot of Love in Asia was the time where a lot of people are actually watching television. Like that's, I think that's the time. I think that's the 7 o'clock time to 8 o'clock.
And this is
And
before
8 o'clock
Netflix and everything, so everyone's on
yes,
television.
everyone's on television, and like the 7 to 8 timeline is actually a prime time time slot in Korea, because the 8 o'clock you start the daily dramas where a lot of people are waiting for it, because this is KBS, and a lot of people are waiting for those daily dramas, ilil drama, and they are actually just sitting in front of their TV starting from 6 o'clock in the evening, all throughout until 9 o'clock, until the 9 o'clock news. So that's what happens, and there are a lot of viewers. I think the highest it got, I don't really know, but Love in Asia got very high viewer ratings. That's why they put it on that prime time slot. And the thing is, we say, and then during that time, Love in Asia came first, and then Misuda came after. I don't know if you have heard of it, but Minyo Duresuda. Yeah. So these are, chit chat with global ladies. But Misuda actually means, Minyo Duresuda, talk with pretty ladies. That's it.
Sounds
and the
weird.
ladies, and the ladies that you see on Love in Asia are married migrants. They are married to Korea and they are part of a family. And most of the, not most, but all of the women that you see in Misuda, what their goal was to have single women living in Korea gathered, single foreign women living in Korea gathered in one particular space, in one particular program, and talking about cultural differences and all this and all that. Now, the biggest thing for me, the biggest shock for me came at a time when there was something that was being said. I mean, Misuda is a variety program. It's supposed to make people laugh. Whereas Love in Asia is actually, a documentary program about families where people always cry their eyes out. Almost always. So it's like it's in the different, different ends of the spectrum.
Going for the tears.
But then again, So, but then again, in Misuda, they will say, because they concentrated on culture. Like they concentrated on how it is in France and how it is in Korea and how wrong it is to do this in Korea and how odd it is that Korea is doing this and other countries are not doing this. So they actually are trying to, give their opinions, some of them negative, most of them negative. And then most of the viewers in Misuda will actually say, maza. Yeah. That's not really a big problem with Koreans. They try. I mean, a lot of people are actually more accepting. But that was the time slot for Misuda, I think, was 11 in the evening. So you have different people watching the show than those in the prime time waiting for the daily dramas. They're the older generation set on TV at 7, and most of the younger generation starts their television viewing at 10 o'clock because of those dramas, of
Hmm.
course, 10 o'clock and up. So it's like that. The society was like that way back. And then we say the same thing that someone mentioned in Misuda.
Mm.
And we had a different reaction in Love in Asia. I mean, the next day we found our boards. There were still bulletin boards on programs on the internet, and it was bombarded with complaints.
Wow.
I mean, how could you think of Korea that way? And I began asking people, why do you think we got different answers from people? Like, it's okay for these people, and why is it not okay for us? And
Mm.
one particular person actually told me that because your family, I mean, they posted it actually on the bulletin board, but these
Mm.
women are supposed to raise Korean kids. How can they think Korea? How can they think of Korea that way?
Wow.
It was, yeah, it was slated as that. So since we're family, since we're going to raise young Korean kids, we are not supposed to think negative about Korea. And for those in Minyo Duresuda,
Mm.
they can speak their minds because, and people can be so welcoming of it because they're visitors. And you know how Koreans are when it comes to visitors.
Yeah.
They wanted those people to go back to their countries and speak highly of Korea. You know, speak of how friendly and how
Mm.
open is Korea. And for us, it's sort of a, well, you're here, you're going to stay in Korea, so you have to think positive. That was how it came to me. That was how I understood the differences way back then. Now, a lot of people will, they almost always compare, like, you know, these are not those people that from that, you know, that we see in Love in Asia. Those are
Mm.
not the kind of people that we want, but those people who are from Minyo Duresuda, they
Mm.
are like college students, exchange students. They're studying here in Korea.
Right.
They probably might be, you know, college graduates taking their masters or their PhD here in Korea, and they're
Mhm.
trying to learn Korean fast enough because it's a prerequisite in university, which is different from, you know, those women getting married to Korean men.
Yep.
So they are amazed that they can speak good Korean. So, like, those are the kind of women that we want, not this kind of women.
Mm.
It felt like that during just looking at that two particular programs back then.
It's fascinating to consider that the same idea or any sort of
Uh-huh.
criticism or observation of Korean culture, it would be accepted if young, single, pretty, or sometimes white people said it. But then
Yeah.
if the people that actually live here and have families here raise the same issues, that they would be told
Hmm.
not to mention those things. So it's the identity that plays a real big role.
Yeah.
As,
Yes. Hmm.
yeah.
I have seen actually one of your columns about, you know, talking about the identity,
Mm.
the Korean identity and how important it is. And yeah, that's about it. I mean, those people are visitors and you are here to stay. So you have to have you
Mm.
pride in that particular Korean identity because you have to raise, you know, Korean kids.
Hmm.
It was how I looked at it during that particular time. A lot has changed, maybe not a lot for many people, but still changes are happening.
I think
Uh,
so. I think South Korea is slowly getting a little bit more critical of itself. There's not
yeah.
like the
Uh-huh.
gukbong everywhere. There is slowly
Mm,
becoming that in the dramas, the news, the movies. The
yeah.
slowly it's putting the lens on itself a little bit more. I think. I don't know.
Uh-huh.
Do you agree or?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, the society itself is changing. I mean, the
Mm.
government itself is changing. I have tried, when I was a member of the assembly, I have tried to actually make sure that, you know, um, like, for example, the Multicultural Family Center,
Mm.
um, I was one of those, which was a very big surprise for many Koreans working at multicultural centers or,
Hmm.
you know, working for multicultural family projects. It was a big surprise for them that when went to the assembly, I actually agreed on because we have like 218 multicultural family support centers,
Hmm.
and we have Konggang Kajok
Yep.
Sinungwan. Like we have a Konggang Kajok Center, you know, a healthy family center
Mm.
that are supposed to be for Koreans, and the Multicultural Family Support Center are for, you know, multicultural
So
families.
they were separated again.
They were separate. There were
Right.
80 like Konggang Kajong centers, healthy
Mm,
family centers, and 218 multicultural family support centers. And I
mm,
said, they should be together. I
right.
said, that would mean we will have like 298 centers that all of the families here in Korea can go to.
Yeah.
And but then again, they were so surprised because it's of course about the policy that if you mix two together, I mean, where can we? I mean, we have to concentrate on multicultural families because they need more help. But I
Mm,
said, the more separate the more you separate people,
yeah.
I mean, the more difficult it is because all of these kids are going to grow up and they're going to work, they're going to go into the mainstream society, and you don't divide, there's no divide in the mainstream society. And if you,
Hmm.
I mean, if you raise them separately, what will happen? That's the same answer that I gave the Kupangbu, the Ministry of Defense, when they
Mm,
called me. That was way back in 2010, 11, I think. Before I even became a member of the assembly, I got a random phone call. I don't know if it's random or I don't know where they got my phone number, but they
yeah.
said it was from the Ministry of Defense, and they were asking me. Um, Now, 2011 was the year when it became mandatory for multicultural family kids, kids
Mm,
from multicultural families,
mm,
uh, to go to the military when it became mandatory. That was that particular time. And they were asking me, what do you think should the Ministry of Defense do for these multicultural kids coming to the military now because it's mandatory?
yeah.
And I could, why are you asking me this question? And they were like saying, oh well, we have seen on the newspapers, on TV, how they were bullied, how they were discriminated upon, and we don't want that to happen because the military is a society in itself, a small
Hmm.
society in itself, and it's really conservative, and we don't want that happening in the military. So what's your suggestion? I asked them. So you think we should make a different like platoon for them or a different base camp for them? And I only had one question to throw at them. I mean,
Yeah.
if a war comes, will they be fighting separately? Like they
It's
said,
true.
"Y-
Yeah.
yeah.
They
She
wouldn't be.
stopped and yeah, she stopped and then she said, um, no, together. So why are you training them apart?
Yeah.
And that was the end of the conversation. It's my main goal. So when they were asking me about multicultural family support centers, they most of the people are actually were actually thinking that I'm going to go for in support of having it separate, but no, not for me. I
I.
mean, if you have the same projects, why not just do it one step? Have another step,
Mm,
like it's an easy I've been looking at it at an easier perspective. I don't know that people can't get, like, for example, both of those centers will actually have like let's say a flower arrangement class.
hmm.
Now if you have a flower arrangement class, you actually have a beginner class, an intermediate class, and an advanced class. And
Sure.
the teachers are asking me, what do you think will happen? I mean, if we mix both together and they are both at a flower arrangement class, I mean, if we try to speak Korean
Mm,
for multicultural families, that will make it like, a boring for
mm,
Korean families. And if we speak fast, if we speak Korean fast
yeah.
for the Korean members, for the Korean students, the multicultural families might have a difficult time trying to adjust to it.
Hmm.
And I told them, so language is your only problem because we're all human beings. I mean,
Yeah.
what we see, we can copy. I mean, language is the only problem. So why not have, a lower lower beginner level where multicultural families, where you acquaint multicultural families or foreign spouses with the words that you use when it comes to flower arrangement. I mean, there's
Hmm.
not much talk about flower arrangement. I mean, you can actually just show them how to do it because that's how flower arrangements are. You have to show them how
Right.
to do it. And so you can have a lower beginner level, and then you'll put them together in the beginner level. And then you can have a lower intermediate level to
Hmm.
acquaint people with the words that you use for the intermediate level, and then mix them together in the intermediate level with the Korean nationals. I mean, that's how we do it, step by step. We just have to make one more step to be able to more inclusive for all of the members of the society who were not there from the start.
I really agree with your idea that it should be about integration rather than exclusion or separation, because if you separate people, then how many degrees of separation? Because not all Tamuna is the same and everything. Just to put one big group doesn't work. You mentioned very briefly, Jasmine, that when you went into politics, and this is another one of your huge achievements in the history of Korea, that you become the first non-ethnic Korean to become a member of the National Assembly, a legislator. So really interestingly, you joined the Saenuri Party, Saenuridang, the Conservative Party, 2012. What was it like going into the National Assembly? And isn't it interesting that you joined the Conservative Party rather than, let's say, the Democratic Party at that time?
That was a lot. That was a question that I gotten so much from people.
Okay, sorry.
When I started, but I really love to explain that particular part to people, because
Please.
I mean, honestly, in Korea, I mean, in the bigger picture, there's no really a great divide between the Democrats and the conservatives, just like it is in the US. That's how I perceive it. I mean, being a part of that particular group, what they call the less than 1% of the nation.
Right.
Anyway, when I first was in politics, the reason I first came to politics was because there's this particular NGO who wanted to have a project entitled 첫 지방 첫 이주 여성 지방 의원 project, 지방 의원 만들기 project. So first married migrant woman member, the making of the first married migrant woman member of the city council. That was honestly in detail the title of the project itself. And because I was on television back then already, they know that I could speak Korean well enough, and they were looking for people, to be the spokesperson of the project itself. And they needed someone who actually speak Korean good enough. I mean, fluently. And I really didn't want to join that particular project at first, but a lot of friends, but they contacted KBS, and the producer talked to me. I mean, I can just join the program. And some of my friends actually wanted to join the program itself. So okay, I said, I'm going to join the program, but that doesn't mean I want to become a politician. It's not actually, I have never thought of it. And when I joined that particular project, that the director, I think Isa, the executive director of that particular NGO, is or was a member of the Democratic Party, who also became a Ministry of Culture, Sports, and Minister of Culture, Sports, and Tourism. So she is a member of the Democratic Party. So all in all, when we were doing the project itself, as it went by, we realized that, if we are going to go into politics, it will be for the Democratic Party. I mean, that makes sense, right? Because this is a project from a group under the Democratic Party itself. And then when we finished the project after 2 years, they gave all of our, that was in 2008. And the elections were in 2010 for the local elections for 2010. And they gave out all of our resumes to different parties, because of course this is a project that they got budget from the government, so they needed to actually see what kind of a result they will get. And I got a call from back then it was Handaratang. It wasn't Saenuridang even. So I got a call. They asked me to be, they're giving me the proportional representation seat for Gyeonggi-do, which makes sense. But I turned it down because I have never lived in Gyeonggi-do. And I said, maybe if it's so, it might be different. And then they passed me on to Seoul. And then they said, I said, if you're not giving me the number one proportional
Mm.
representative seat, I'm not doing it.
Okay.
So it's not actually what I had in mind was not actually, it's not actually going to politics itself, but being represented when
Mm.
we start this, because this is the very first time that a non-ethnic Korean is going to politics here in
Sure.
Korea.
Yeah.
So it's a sort of that kind of a thing. So this has always been Hanaradang. And
Hmm.
then so when I turned it down, I mean the very I forgot, because there I did it 4 times. The very first was a Chiyokku. It's for a district.
Hmm.
They called me up and asked me if I wanted to run for a district. And I said, "Are you crazy?" It's like, what district? I mean, I am new to politics. I'm not even a politician. I don't have a politician family. I don't have a
Mm.
political background or whatever. And now you're asking me to totally run for a district. And then
Mm.
they asked me for the Gyeonggi-do
Hmm.
slot and for the Seoul City slot, and they were offering me number 5 slot, but I told them no. And so that was it in 2010. And then 2011 came, because for the 2012 national elections,
Hmm.
and it was also Senator who offered me that particular slot
Why
for
were
a
they so
proportional
keen to
representative.
have you, Jasmine? What was your take? Why were they
Well,
so desperate? Mm.
that was the time that they're trying to actually change their image. That
Hmm.
was the time that it was it was kind of a time when they are actually losing. They are actually afraid of losing, of being the minority
Okay.
in the government. So
Mm.
they wanted to change. They wanted people to see that they are changing.
Hmm.
And for me, honestly, it did not matter which party. I asked the group, I asked my mentor what she thinks of it and why are they coming for me? And I
Yeah.
mean, why are they asking for me to join the party every single time? And she says, nobody knows about multiculturalism here in Korea. Nobody knows about the migrants. Nobody cares that much
Mm.
about the migrants here in Korea. And if you can have a voice in the assembly,
Hmm.
this will mean a lot for all of the migrants here in Korea, for all of the immigrants here in Korea. It doesn't matter which party you are a member of.
Hmm.
And that's how and that's when I took the offer. And when I went to the assembly too, it doesn't really matter. I mean, the Democratic Party don't know anything about migrants.
Mm.
They're not really, nobody actually, not the Democratic, not the conservative, not Senuridang, not
Mm.
Minjudang. No one actually is really in any way interested. They would actually talk about it, have press conference uh, um, about the laws or about the bills that they're trying to push, but they are not
Mm.
really into it deep. You know, they're just like testing the waters of some sort. And when I moved to I mean to the Chongidang or
Mm.
the Justice
Hmm.
Party,
Yeah.
it's the same. I was really so surprised because when I joined the party, I told them, okay, can you please give me all of the campaign pledges, all of the policies that Justice Party members have passed to, have written,
Yeah.
and they cannot show me any.
Wow.
And that was the big surprise. So I
That's
told
kind of
them,
sad. Mm.
yeah, that's kind of sad. That's really, really sad. They gave me like a half a page,
Mm.
a half a page of a presidential campaign pledge. I think it's
Mm.
either a presidential campaign pledge or a presidential not a presidential or a national elections campaign for multicultural families or for workers.
Mm.
But a half a page, are you kidding me?
Right. From the Justice Party as well, and that was like recently, 2019. You joined
Yeah,
them.
that was yeah, and I've been there in 2012, and we had our first like member of the Gyeonggi-do Council in
Mm.
2010, a non-ethnic Korean member of the Gyeonggi-do Council. She was given the number one proportional representative, and she's from
Mm.
Mongolia.
Hmm.
So there's that 10 plus year, almost 10-year history.
Yeah.
I mean, 10 plus years of history, and still no
What?
no bills or no policies
Why is that?
being written for this
Is
group.
there's a
I don't
lack of?
know.
There's no votes in it. There's no interest in it, or?
I think in the Liberty Party, what they are actually trying to explain to me, because not the Liberty Party, the Justice Party, what they are trying to explain to me is the fact that they can only get, maybe 6 people maximum, 5 to 6 people maximum, in the assembly, and they have so many agendas to look at, and because there are no people who are really experienced when it comes to immigration, or to immigration and migrants. I mean, they haven't really thought of it that much.
Yeah, they've got a lot of issues
So,
that they're going with. So have you thought about
women's
like
issues, workers' issues?
Have you thought about the Jasmine Dang? Would that work?
A lot of people actually were, I don't know, they were joking about, you know what, you should make like an immigrant, party, party for immigrants here in Korea. And I was like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? But the last elections, in a way, made me think, of the possibility of that happening in the future. Not necessarily me, making a party for immigrants, but the possibility of it happening. Now, last national elections, I am the only one who made it through the preliminaries.
Okay.
Within the party. I mean, because everyone, I mean, there were a lot of changes with the, the constitution when it comes to elections for that particular 2020 national elections.
Right, the proportional representation.
Yeah, the proportional representation.
Yeah,
but it wasn't big, right? It ended up, going back to the way that it used to.
Sure. Yeah.
Now, the biggest problem is that I can see was, people are trying, and this is something that I also, a lot of people also mentioned, democracy for minorities. Like democracy is a very big thing. It is a very important thing.
Yeah.
But this is not enough for the minorities. I mean, voting is a democratic thing, right? It's having the opportunity to vote is democracy, actually, trying to pick your own candidates. But the thing is, every single party back in 2020, back in that last year in the elections, they've had non-ethnic Koreans vying for proportional representative seats. But they all, way back, it was a kongchan for me, I was given a slot by the party, by the power of the party. But this time, because of the changes regarding the election process, especially about the proportional representatives, everyone should be voted for, not given a slot. And what's funny is, this is the first time, non-ethnic Koreans in the political arena is really a very new thing. In the political arena here in Korea. It's really a very new thing. I was the first, but back in 2020, we had from that's Kuminahim, right? This time Kuminahim and Minjudang, we have non-ethnic Koreans vying for the proportional representative seats. I mean, Minjudang had Wonokum, who is an activist and who's from Vietnam, right? They had, I think, 2 to 3 people from non-ethnic backgrounds vying for proportional representative seats, and I was the only one for the Justice Party. And of course, they wanted it to be democratic, so people from the party and people from outside the party were given proportions to vote for the people that they wanted to represent the proportional representative slate in each party. But how many people would vote for non-ethnic Koreans?
Right. Yeah.
And that's really so sad. Nobody made it in any other party besides me. I made it to the top 5. I think it was top 5 of the proportional representative list in the Justice Party. That is through votes from party members. And I made it. But then again, because we are a small party and we are actually trying to push for the young people to represent the party itself, I've got pushed to the back. But then again, nobody made it. No non-ethnic Korean made it in other parties. I mean, you can see how difficult it would be. It's like running for a district slot, uh, when all of the foreigners here in Korea, all 2 million of us are scattered in the country. There's no particular district.
Right.
That there are only foreigners living in it, unless the country decides that, okay, all foreigners live here.
That's not a good
right?
no, let's not do that. It's kind of sad to see how those changes, which were meant to give more representation, actually only solidified the strength of the two parties. It seemed to work against. Now, you've been in the politics, and you mentioned how it was Hanuradang and Sanuridang. They change their names all the time. Korean politics from the outside seems really difficult. They're changing their colors, their names, everything all the time. What's it like? What's it like day to day? When you're inside there with these characters, can you give us any insight into Korean politics from the inside, Jasmine?
The reason why I said there's no great divide when it comes to, the conservatives or the Democratic Party, the Conservative Party and the Democratic Party here in Korea. So that's Kuminahim. And there's the two major parties. There's no really that big a divide. I mean, inside the assembly, within the National Assembly, besides the bigger issues, the very political issues.
Maybe on North Korea.
Besides that, it may be not North Korea, probably, or a presidential bet of some sorts. Besides that particular big thing, everything is the same within the assembly. I mean, they manage to adjust every single bill. And it's sort of a give and take. What's happening inside is a give and take. Like, okay, I'm going to I'm going to take one step backward in this, but in the other thing, in another bill, can you please take one step backward as well? So it's always a negotiation. There are always talks. It might not seem like that. It might seem like you're fighting outside, especially in media, because that's what it's supposed to look like. But in the inside, it's kind of like a lot more easier to negotiate without the prying eyes of the media or of the people outside.
That's kind of sad, I think, that there's not, that the conflict is done for the media, but inside there's more agreement. I'm not sure how much you would want to go into this, but how influential are certain figures inside there? Is it run on sort of charisma and certain powerful figures, or is it more factional based? Or what's that like, Jasmine?
For each party, I cannot say for everyone, but when I was in the assembly, it was more of a Koreans. It only becomes factional comes when it comes election time.
Right.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing that you can see, that it becomes factional because of that, because we have different factions trying to push for their bet to become the majority floor leader, to become the party leader. That's where you see the divide. But besides that, more so on the bigger scale of things, we always try to make sure that things are negotiated upon. There might be one or two voices who might be on the negative side, or who might not agree to what the entire party has agreed upon. But most of the time, when you send like party leaders or majority or floor leaders to a meeting together, it's been talked upon within the party itself and voted upon. And since it's a vote, not everyone will agree on it. But then since it was voted upon, then you actually try to formulate how you will actually deal with the other floor leader when it comes to trying to push the issues that or the agendas that is, of course, more positive to your party.
It's hopefully there is change in these politics. I know you've been
Uh-huh.
pushing hard for many things, anti-discrimination laws and things like this that seem important for people in the country, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Just looking forward, Jasmine, to maybe
Uh-huh.
like a final question, perhaps. I know you're doing lectures at various institutions around the country. Um, where is Korea today? What can it do going forward? What should it be doing going forward? What should I be doing, we be doing, you be doing?
Mm-hmm.
You're an optimist, I think, but is the
Yeah.
future optimistic? What do we do in real life? How does it play out?
Yeah, actually, it was 2 weeks ago when I went to the countryside to do a lecture, and it
Mm,
was an open lecture. So, people who wanted to listen to the lecture will just come and sign in, or will just drop by the place.
mm-hmm.
And I was really so surprised because most of the people who came
Yeah,
are in their like either late 40s or 50s to 60s,
yeah.
and they know that it was me who is going to do the lecture,
Mm-hmm.
and they are there to listen. It was like a
That's
big
cool.
thing for me because
Mm,
most of the time when I do lectures, they are for a particular set of people. You don't sign up for it. It's either students that are being brought together, or
yeah.
an NGO group that's being brought together, or
Mm,
members of an NGO being brought together. So it's not mostly an open lecture where people can sign up. And I was really so surprised that people from that particular age
yeah,
bracket
that's great.
would come to that lecture. And they were also I mean, not understanding, they were also keen
Mm,
to listen to what I have to say, and to the changes that, so what should we do?
mm,
That they were asking me about that. But um, I think with the way, I mean, being here in Korea for 25, 26 years,
yeah.
um, I think we're trying. What the big thing that I am seeing is that we're still in a phase where we're trying to not look at the big picture, but try to just um, get little parts of the little things, and
Yeah.
get it fixed little by little. What I am saying is the fact that when I worked for, like, let's say, for the rights of the migrant kids, for the invisible children,
Mm,
those are one of the main goals that I've had in the assembly. What I call the invisible children are those born here in Korea who cannot be registered in Korea because their families are, here undocumented, or
mm-hmm.
their families cannot um, register them in the country where they are from,
Mm,
for various reasons. So these kids are growing up here without here in Korea, speaking Korean,
yeah.
thinking that they are Korean, but they don't actually have a nationality per se, and they don't even have like records of birth because we did not have that. That's
Mm,
why I had the Ijoadong Kolibujang Kibungpop. So this is a bill for the rights, securing the rights of migrant children.
mm-hmm.
And it was phased out, and it was really a very, very big deal. It has the most numbers of of what do you call that, of that cool of messages,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
in
Mm,
the assembly, in the assembly web page, where 95% of the people are against it. Like,
mm,
they were really so surprised that a particular bill can gather 15,000 comments
right.
in the assembly. Like, not a lot of people are very much interested with all of the other bills. You can see
Sure.
one less than 10, and then they see suddenly 15,000, and
What
that's a
kind of
lot.
comments were they? Positive comments?
Like,
They could. What,
negative, 95%
right.
of them are
Okay.
against the bill. But then again, so it got, it got scratched by the
Attention.
end of my term.
Mm,
But then again, what I'm seeing right now, for the past few years, the government is actually trying to adopt each one of the clauses that was within the bill that I made, and putting
mm,
it into policy these days. So I
that's
think
great.
the biggest fact uh, and the last bill that I actually passed in the assembly, that I actually wrote in the assembly before I finished my term, is it's a bill regarding having an agency in the government that only um, concentrates on immigration and how it is in Korea. I mean, we cannot just benchmark um, the immigration policies in, let's say, Germany, especially Germany. We have been benchmarking a lot because, you know, they were also divided and we're also divided. And they're also using, you know, benchmarking a lot of um, policies in Germany, and they're using it here in Korea. But then Germany is not Korea. They are an immigrant country, and we are not an immigrant, and Korea is not an immigrant country. And you know, Korea is not even trying to call itself an immigrant country. And they don't even have a word for, you know, those who are trying to come to migrate here in Korea. Like we have immigration and emigration, and we only have like imin, that denotes, you know, people going out of Korea. So we don't even have a definition for who is iminja. We don't have a definition for imin, for migration here in Korea. No legal definition of some sort. The only definition we have in the law is Tamuna kajong, multicultural family. You know, a family that's made up of Korean married to a foreign national. We don't have any other. We have different words for different people, for different foreign people, for different expats here in the nation. So I said we should have, because most of the bills, of course, most of the things that people will foresee is only for 4 years or 5 years the longest, and that's because that's the term of National Assembly members or of the president. And we should have a separate entity, a separate body who is actually trying to figure out what's going to work for Korea. I mean, for you yourself, you know, a lot of foreigners who are actually really so confused because of the different changes when it comes to visa policies every single year. And that's really so hard to cope up with because the government kept on changing itself according to what's happening in the society. If there are certain issues, and then they change this. If there is a certain agenda, and then they change this. You know, you're just out there. There's no particular foundation of what policies should be there and should not be there for expats here in the nation, for immigrants here in the nation. Let's say that. So I needed a body, you know, an agency of the government who are actually trying to look forward on how Korea will look like, on how the demography of Korea will look like 10 years, 20 years from now. We have to answer, if we're not going to be an immigration or an immigrant country, just like the US, just like Germany, just like all of those big immigrant countries out there, then we should actually try to figure out who are we going to accept, how many are we going to accept, and how are we going to do that. This should be in line with how the government are trying to look forward, not just, okay, oh, we need workers because, you know, there is too much to harvest and we don't have people to work for it. We have to be looking forward to that already because the population is dropping. So, you know, we're just trying to do bandage policies, you know, oh, we have problem here, let me take a bandage, let me just, you know, put a temporary cure on it. There's no temporary cure on it. We cannot, you know, we cannot push away people who are already here, and we cannot just accept every single person. So we have to have like a standard of how are we going to face immigration and how are we going to do this. And we have been doing that already anyway with the workers. I mean, we only have we are only accepting for I'm only talking about the E9 workers, the employment permit system workers for the factories and the construction. We have only 16 countries. We are only accepting workers from 16 particular countries. Then that's good. I mean, if that's what the government, if that's what we want as a nation, then we should, you know, just make it clear on what we're going to do, who are we going to accept, and how are we going to do it. To do it, but no agency in the government is actually doing the planning for that thing.
you're right. It needs long-term systems in
Mm-hmm,
place that don't just flip-flop according to media stories or what's politically expedient in the short term. Needs those
mm-hmm,
long-term visions, those standards, and
mm-hmm.
I hope you're part of
But
that conversation and you continue to be.
I hope so as well. But people are a bit, I know where the hesitance comes from. They're
Okay.
hesitant to make an agency such as that because it would feel like they are actually trying to be an immigrant country. I
Yeah.
mean, it's like it's just a change in mindset for the society, for the people.
Mm.
Like when I first went to the assembly, the very first bill that I actually passed is um, trying to have a mandatory education regarding in understanding multiculturalism and diversity in Korea. And I was putting it mandatory for elementary, middle, high school,
Mm.
government employees and teachers because they are I mean, they are the people who are really responsible for a lot of things,
Yeah.
especially education of the young generation. We should
Absolutely.
start with them, of course. But then again, one of the questions that I really was so surprised about when we were discussing it within the assembly,
Mm. Well, what
there
was the
was a
question?
member of there was a member of the assembly who actually asked, I don't think we can do this as a mandatory thing because I don't think we have discussed it with the nation if we are going to be a multicultural society or not.
Mm.
So so it's really, I mean, that's from the inside.
Yeah.
Those people are lawmakers, legislators, and if they think like that, we're a long way from home.
Isn't it the case that lawmakers, I've never found an answer to this, but I feel that lawmakers in South Korea, looking from the outside, bear that in mind, that they will often go with what the public want, what is popular,
Yes.
rather than in terms of actual constitution or values or something. But they'll do
Mm-hmm.
this kind of shigisangjo and they'll push things down
Mm-hmm.
the line. And
Mm-hmm.
in some sense, that's kind of democratic because it's what the public wants. But
Once, yeah.
in the other sense, it's also like, no, there needs to be some values. And sometimes the lawmakers need to push things through that are good for some people,
Mm-hmm.
even though the public might have some hesitancy, right?
Yeah, I know that. That's what happened to the anti-discrimination bill. That's what's been happening to it.
Yeah.
And honestly, one of the things when we passed the refugee bill, we have
Mm.
a refugee bill, and we're not an, an immigrant country. That's really so funny. But
When
anyway,
when was the refugee bill?
that was passed in, I think, in 2008 before I even came to the assembly, and
Okay.
it was I think it was what do you call, I forgot the word. um they did a revamp of it
Hmm.
back when I was in the assembly. That was, I think, back in 2015 or something. Oh, 2011. But anyway,
Right.
it's been there in 2011. It passed. There was a lot of people who were against it, but then again, it passed. And one of the biggest reason is because of um, how they actually explain to people what this is.
Hmm.
Korea is an OECD country,
Yeah.
and Korea is a part of the global community, and Korea is a part of the UN, and the Korean War. There were a lot of refugees for the Korean War. A lot of people accepted as. I mean, they framed it as
Mm.
something that the global community needs Korea to do.
Hmm.
It was framed as sort of like that.
An obligation
It
or
became
something.
easier.
Mm.
Yeah. It became easier for the society to accept it. Oh, yeah, we're global. Yeah, we're a big country now. We should be doing this. This is our responsibility to the universe of some sorts. It become easier for people to accept that.
Hmm.
And it's not like that with every other bill, especially when it comes to immigration.
Yeah.
I mean, not a lot of people. I mean, it's how you frame it, actually. And yes, you are correct when people. That's what happened to. Before I came to assembly, no, when I was in the assembly, there
Mm.
was a bill from Senuridang and a bill from Minjodang back then.
Mm.
One was an anti-discrimination bill from Minjodang, and one is actually I think a human rights bill or something from Senuridang,
Mm-hmm.
and they were all pulled back. When you sign here in Korea, when you sign a bill, when you co-sign a bill,
Yeah.
as a member of the National Assembly, you cannot take your name off the bill unless the main the person who is the main the main person who proposed the bill takes the entire bill out.
Okay.
Out of the what do you, I'm lost for words.
Unless
But
they
anyway,
remove it completely, your name
unless
is
they
on the
remove it,
bill.
yeah.
Yeah.
Unless they remove it completely, you cannot take your name off if you co-sign it. Only the main proposal, or the person who proposed the bill, can actually remove it altogether. And it was so sad because both of those bills from two different parties, from the two major parties, they both are talking about anti-discrimination and equality for the people. Why were they removed? Because of the freedom to express for sexual expression. So of course the churches, the religious community, and a lot of other people were against it, pushing it. So what they did was, all of those people who co-signed this particular bill, they pushed them. They called the offices. They warned them that what's going to happen to them on the next election. And because here, if you're a politician, you're worried what's going to happen to you, especially when it comes to the churches, because they have a lot of people. Right. They have a lot of followers. And what happened was, these members of the assembly who are being forced by the people from their districts are actually talking and convincing, the person who proposed the bill itself to pull it out. And what happened was both parties pulled that particular bill out. And I don't know if it's
religious lobbying. Yeah. You attribute this to sort of Christian lobbying groups that influence.
What they were saying is because of the if people remove, way back then they did not even say that, because they don't want this, they don't want that. There are religious sectors, there are non-religious sectors as well who are against a freedom of sexual expression. Yeah. And of course that's the biggest thing that they actually were thinking about. I mean, they're okay with everything else except for that. But then again, if you ask them directly, okay, so if we remove this particular part, are you okay for it to be passed? Will it pass the what do you call this? Will it pass the legislation? And they said, oh, well, we'll have to think about it again. So that's one of the biggest things. One particular thing, and I just wished someone, I mean, they are two big parties, they are two major parties. Yeah. They can actually just mix it all together, build one team and push it. They can, right. But they did not.
Yeah, and it's interesting why they haven't. I mean, because we often hear about sort of human rights and progressive people in South Korea, but there's always so much hesitancy with this amongst the Democratic Party and the Conservative Party and other elements. So it's so frustrating, I guess, to see why it doesn't go through when they have the ability to. They have the assembly majority at some points.
Yeah, so it's really it is a very, very big. I mean, just look at me. I am a part of the majority party way back then. Of the majority party way back then, I was thinking, if I am pushing for this particular, I will have a lot of help from people, from party members, because they took me in. So they probably would be. You cannot expect 100% of. I mean, you cannot expect everyone agreeing with you, but at least I can have more than I would have. But I'd say, not a lot of people are very much interested in the agendas and the issues that I'm pushing. And that's really sad.